Hi everybody, welcome to FoundFlix. Today we'll be doing something a little different and investigating the modern murder mystery of Knives Out, where a detective travels to the massive home of the wealthy Thrombey clan to determine the truth behind the recent death of the family patriarch. This is one that I've been really anticipating since the trailer first came out. I've always loved murder mysteries, and they have definitely fallen out of fashion in modern film. And this looked to be taking the classic Agatha Christie style and adding a modern twist. But what stood out the most was the absolutely stellar cast that has been assembled to fill the Thrombey's family roles. The lineup includes heavy hitters like Jamie Lee Curtis, Christopher Plummer, Michael Shannon, and Toni Collette, who all do well with their parts playing arrogance and useless quite well. But it's two actors cast against type that truly shine amongst the stacked cast. Daniel Craig as the great Southern Fried detective Benoit Blanc, showing a real knack for comedy and just being much more eccentric than we're used to compared to the steely gaze of James Bond. As well as Captain America himself, Chris Evans, you know, the most good boy ever, here reveling in a quite different role as the ruthless, devious, and all-around jerk-ass oldest son Ransom. Even that name alone, come on. Both Evans and Craig really stand at the heap of great actors assembled. Overall, it is a funny, thrilling ride full of unexpected twists and turns. Where it ran into some problems for me is the particular way that it subverts the expectations of what we're used to with a murder mystery, which isn't really a total surprise considering the writer and director is Rian Johnson, who brought us the extremely divisive The Last Jedi, which almost seemed obsessed with giving us the opposite of what he thinks we want. It's totally acceptable to do something unexpected, but just doing something we don't expect doesn't inherently make it good either, you know? It's less of a murder mystery and more of a socio-political commentary that I would have anticipated, or perhaps satire. And ultimately, they didn't really have much else to say other than old, conservative, rich white people suck. Yeah, I'm well aware of that. Although there are some perhaps too obvious political statements laid out in the beginning, it does after a major shift in the dynamics halfway through the story, where they reveal the supposed killer of Harlan becomes a much more amusing class warfare satire than where it started. Although this midway reveal does turn out to be a massive red herring, leading to a huge climax and a shocking twist. Alright, so let's dig into Knives Out, looking at how the mysterious death of the patriarch unfolds and mutates with each new piece of information discovered, and explaining the ending as well as including who our real killer is and what it all means. Our monumental inciting incident is the death of family patriarch Harlan Thrombey, a quite rich and successful mystery novel author. Found in his study with his throat slit, dagger in hand, there is no reason to assume foul play, and the death is ruled a suicide. Yet 1 week after his death, the police, along with the well-renowned private detective Benoit Blanc, gather the family again with more questions, which gives the indication that there is more to Harlan's death than it appears on the surface. The extended Thrombey family is quite combative and, well, pretty awful people as we come to learn, an obvious stand-in for the disconnected and conservative 1%. There's daughter Linda, who at least built her own business, even if her dear old dad did give her $1 million loan to get it off the ground. Sound familiar? Her husband Richard, who is pretty much a walking incarnation of the OK Boomer meme, talking of immigration control and other hot right-wing takes on current events, along with their son Ransom, who, despite being considered the black sheep of the family, seemed to have the closest relationship with Harlan. At one point, his grandfather saying he can see a lot of himself in the boy. Walt, also Harlan's son, has his own family, wife Donna, and pervert/neo-Nazi rhetoric spewing son Jacob, who no one in the family seems to care for, which says a lot coming from these idiots. Geez, Bill, what happened to you? Pennywise fucked you up good. And finally, there's the spacey new age Joni, head of a goop-like beauty product empire who is technically not even part of the family anymore, as she and her husband aren't together. So it's simply about the money and convenience for her, which is pretty much the reality for all of the family. It's all about the money that Harlan has been providing for each and every one of them. And with his death, that security has come into a dangerously precarious position, and who knows what Harlan's will hold. So despite them being confused as the death was ruled a suicide, Blanc and the others re-interview each of the family members to get their version of what happened that night. And what becomes pretty obvious is that reality changes with each of their perspectives, such as others saying Walt and his dad got into a fight, yet when they ask Walt, he downplays it as just a frank exchange of words. And we see for ourselves that's not quite accurate. He works for his father's publishing company and is relentless about getting his dad to sell adaptations of his work, which would net him some fair cash, but Harlan has consistently and adamantly refused. Well, Walt still won't give up, and that night brought up some kind of Netflix deal, hopeful that his dad will take it. But Harlan maintains his position, and this time has had enough of Walt, firing him from his job, but offering that he hopes it's actually a positive change. As we already understand, these people, despite being adults with families, are basically useless human beings with nothing to offer, just floating by on Harlan's never-ending cash flow. And it appears that he's finally gotten fed up with it, as Walt wasn't the only one cut off that night. Also Jody. Harlan was paying for her daughter's extremely expensive liberal arts college, no small fee of $100K a year. As the family describes it, her SJW degree. Ugh, these people. But Jody had told someone else to wire her the money directly, thusly getting double the cash, and skimming quite a large sum off the top for her own gain. Richard is also in hot water as Harlan has discovered he's having an affair, blackmailing him with supposed photos of him and his mistress together, and demanding that he come clean to his daughter. And Ransom too, only overheard in bits and pieces arguing with Harlan, but he at least must have learned of losing any inheritance, leaving the party early in a huff after talking to his granddad. Geez, it is certainly a sordid web they are weaving in this family, and I definitely understand Harlan's actions. It's one thing to provide for your family, but this is more like enabling them, which has mutated them into money-hungry, vapid shells of people. Through the interviews, we also learn of another important person in Harlan's life, his nurse Marta, which everyone describes as being part of the family, even though each one also says that she's from a different country, making it abundantly clear that this is all for show, especially considering their previous feelings given on immigration. It's all a total farce. After the initial interviews, Blanc and the officers consider the abundance of different possible motives for murder the family has, from losing their cash and basically their lives, or the affair potentially coming out. But Officer Elliot argues those are all weak sauce, too basic and obvious, to which Blanc agrees. They then encounter Marta and are finally able to get some straight facts from her. As Blanc suspects, being close with Harlan, she's privy to a lot of closed-door family business. They also know with 100% certainty if she's telling the truth, as Marta has the most obvious tell of all time if lying. If she does so, this literally causes her to uncontrollably vomit in response. Intrigued, they put the system to the test to get some of the family's story straight, which works flawlessly, and it then becomes time for her official interview, Blanc saving her for last. And as she is questioned, we learn in shocking detail what actually happened that night. At the tail end of the party, a high-spirited Harlan returned to his attic study, happy with cutting all the family members out and genuinely thinking it was good for them, and coerced Marta to join him in a board game, which she handily beats him in. And it's apparent from their interactions that they are truly friends, and he actually does like her, unlike the other terrible people in his family. Can't really blame him there. Right before leaving for the evening, she prepares his nightly medicinal injections, including an extra special birthday treat, just a wee bit of morphine, or the good stuff as he calls it. Somehow distracted in the process, once finishing, she realizes that she's made a terrible mistake and mixed the medicine up, and in fact gave him an absolutely massive dose of morphine, which has severe consequences and will kill him in 10 minutes without another medicine to counteract it. Normally, this medicine would be in her nurse's kit, but somehow it's gone as she desperately searches her bag. Ah, dang! She's still adamant to call an ambulance, but Harlan knows that it won't make it in time, and he concocts a harebrained scheme to cover up what happened and give her an alibi to make sure that she isn't blamed for his death, making a point that if their lawyers went after Marta's family, he knows they would be ruined with no financial backup. She's a little hesitant to follow through at first, coming back in time just as he slices his throat to her horror. Well, that's some motivation. First, he tells her to leave and make sure everyone notices, passing by Walt outside, who noted the time when she left earlier to Blanc. But what no one actually saw was her return to the house later to further cement her innocence. She sneakily climbs up the trellis, breaking a piece on the way up to Harlan's secret window to his room, where she's to don some of Harlan's clothes and go downstairs, knowing that Walt was still there and will send him back to bed. This will provide a way via Walt to establish Marta couldn't have done it. He saw Marta leave at 12 and then later saw what he thought was his dad, still alive. Boom! Alibi, baby! So now we all know that it appears to be Marta that murdered Harlan, even if by accident. And the question shifts from who done it to can she get away with it? Especially difficult with her vomiting when she lies. But Harlan had guidance for that too. Rather than lie, only reveal partial truths, which does keep Blanc off her scent for now. Or perhaps he's had her pegged this whole time, enlisting her as is Watson on his investigations around the grounds, almost keeping her around as a human lie detector, and she has to cover up incriminating evidence along the way, messing up her muddy footprints or disposing of the broken piece of trellis a dog keeps happily bringing to her. And each time she's able to stay one step ahead, though everything is soon about to change once again as the time has come for the fateful will reading. The family gathers, hungrily awaiting their cut of Harlan's loot, and even Ransom finally makes an appearance as his family points out, missing the funeral completely but early for the will reading. Classy dude. And it's plain to see why this family doesn't do too many reunions, quickly devolving into a shouting and name-calling match like a bunch of spoiled children. The will is read, and to everyone's surprise, it's Marta who will be getting everything. Harlan's $60 million, the house, the publishing company, company, leaving literally nothing for his family. Oh, well, that's unfortunate for them. Should have been less terrible people. They are all obviously gobsmacked with this bombshell, flying off the handle and insisting there has to be some kind of mistake. But as the lawyer shows them, it's clearly written in the will, having been changed a week prior to Harlan's passing. They still refuse to accept it, wanting her to give the money back, feeling it's rightfully theirs, even though it was Harlan's money and they didn't do anything to deserve any of it, in fact repeatedly demonstrating why they don't deserve it. Now they're forced to figure out things for themselves. Or perhaps not, the family swarming Marta and sending her fleeing outside, where a white knight is in waiting to save her. Ransom, well, not really a white knight at all, but he does at least give her a ride out of there. He is able to piece together what Marta did and offers to help her get through this, so long, of course, as he gets his fair cut. The gravity of her newfound wealth soon catches up to Marta, waking up to news vans flooding outside of her family's apartment, and arms full of mail from different lawyers looking to cash in. And of course, the family too becomes increasingly desperate, Walt sneaking to find her leaving through the back door and offering to lend his expertise with her affairs. When she refuses, then turning aggressive, demanding her to give in, as she can't possibly do this without the family's vast resources. But she remembers something important. She's the one that's got the resources now, confident in knowing she can do what she needs to not give in to his bullying. What we're seeing here is clearly all about witnessing that shift in power, from her being on the sidelines but pretending to be important to the family, to now being in control of the entire family's fates. That's kind of the real whole point of the story, as we discussed earlier. It's like, now the little guy is in power, how do you like that, you old white bastards? And things become even more complicated when Marta receives an anonymous note in the mail. I know what you did, written under a photocopy only showing the top of Harlan's toxicology report, not actually seeing the full results. Seeking guidance from Ransom, he encourages her to do whatever they have to make sure she doesn't get caught, and sets up a meeting with the blackmailer to find out what it is that they actually want. When she arrives finding a woman in a chair, it's Fran the housekeeper, who is found unresponsive and not looking so good after an overdose of morphine. Clearly the killer is trying to frame Marta to make it look like she's responsible for another murder. Everything winds up back at the Thrombey estate, a guilt-ridden Marta deciding to tell the family what she did and renounce the money. But after finding the original toxicology report, Blanc now understands what really happened here, stopping Marta just in time before she utters a word, ruling the case a suicide, and that's the end of it, leaving things with Marta still getting all their assets. Blanc then goes off on an absolutely bonkers detective-style diatribe, piece by piece putting everything together, which points at Ransom being responsible for the situation and not Marta. The most important piece of evidence is the full toxicology report for Harlan that they find in the housekeeper's stash drawer that shows Harlan's levels were all normal when he died, as in he wasn't actually given an overdose by Marta. It was Ransom who switched the labels on the bottles, as well as removing that other crucial treatment from her bag, having had some nursing experience himself. After learning from his grandfather not only that he was getting cut out of the will, but that Marta was getting everything, he devised a plan to make her inadvertently kill Harlan and lose the cash. If she was found guilty of his murder, the so-called slay law would come into effect, which says if someone is found even partially responsible for death and getting something in the will, they are legally required to forfeit it due to being involved with the crime. The money then returning back to the family. And of course, most importantly, Ransom getting his cut. So his actual plan was never to help her, but do everything in his power to make things turn out how he wanted. And he even hired Blanc to investigate the case in the first place, in hopes that it would reach his favorite outcome. The first hiccup occurred in his plan when he returned to the house to replace the medicine vials. Since it was during Harlan's funeral, he knew the house would be empty, but he didn't count on Fran being there, who catches him red-handed, and in turn gets Harlan's toxicology report from her cousin, yes really, and uses it to blackmail Ransom, leaving a note with the top of the report, which he in turn gave to Marta to get her to deal with it. And he goes so far as to burn the records building to dispose of the evidence, and instead of following through with the blackmail, killed Fran to pin it on Marta, though the report indicated that she didn't accidentally overdose him despite Ransom's attempt. She, being a trained nurse, could instinctively feel the different consistency of the liquids, again actually giving Harlan the correct dosage despite the incorrect labels. So in the end, it was in fact a suicide performed by Harlan himself, falsely believing that his time was limited. And indeed, if he had allowed Marta to call an ambulance, would still be alive. Everything does fit together seamlessly, yet they have no proof of Ransom's wrongdoings. That is until Marta gets a fateful call from the hospital about Fran's state. She tells the others that she is alive at the hospital, and Ransom does admit to attacking her. But Marta can't hold it in any longer, puking on Ransom, as she was lying. Fran is dead, and he just admitted to her murder. Whoops! A desperate Ransom makes a final botched attempt to kill Marta, grabbing a knife from his grandfather's ornate collection, lunging at her and jamming it into her chest. Yet he didn't realize what he chose was a prop knife, the blade retreating back into the handle and doing absolutely nothing. He's taken into custody as his family watches him whisked away. At the top of the staircase, Marta steps out looking down over them, an obvious representation of her newfound power and control lording over the family, leaving us not knowing how helpful she'll be to these vacuous dirtbags. However, since she's presented as pretty much without fault the entire movie, I'm sure she'll wind up helping them to some capacity. Even though if it was me in the same situation, I'd be like, haha, suck it losers, looks like you guys are on your own now. Get the hell off my property, peace! But yeah, that's not really what I expected to happen. Just a terrible person. But frankly, that is what they deserve. Which brings us to the conclusion of this ending explained for Knives Out. While not quite the harrowing mystery tale that I was hoping for and it was sold as, it was still entertaining and extremely well constructed. Of course, there were still those issues. And it's almost like the more money Rian gets, the bigger the problem becomes. Stuff like his debut film Brick, which is still my favorite of his, or the handful of Breaking Bad episodes he directed, including the bottle episode Fly, which, had 2 characters in one location. Really, his best stuff is when there's less toys available to him in the toolbox. Regardless, Knives Out ended up making pretty good bank opening weekend, and I would be interested in seeing a spin-off with another adventure featuring Daniel Craig's great detective. So maybe he'll be able to come up with a more compelling actual mystery for the next time. What did you guys think of Knives Out and its ending? Would you have helped the family at the end or told them to take a hike? Which Rian Johnson movie is your favorite? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Make sure to like, subscribe, and follow. Thanks for watching FoundFlix. See you next time.